Some secrets don't reveal themselves when you tell a lie. They reveal themselves when you accidentally tell the truth. The rain tapped softly against the tall windows of Blackwell Manor as I stood in the grand foyer, holding a bucket of cleaning supplies and trying not to look completely overwhelmed. I had never seen a house this large before. Calling it a house felt ridiculous. It was closer to a private museum. Marble floors stretched beneath crystal chandeliers. Oil paintings watched from the walls with silent judgment. Every step echoed as if the building itself was listening. My name is Claire Bennett, and 3 days earlier I had been living in a tiny apartment above a bakery in Queens. Now I was standing inside the home of Ethan Blackwell, one of the wealthiest men in America. The agency had warned me that the position would be demanding. Long hours, strict standards, absolute professionalism. What they hadn't mentioned was how lonely the place felt. The staff moved quietly through the mansion like ghosts. The housekeeper spoke only when necessary. Even the gardeners outside seemed careful not to disturb the silence. It was as though everyone understood an unspoken rule. This house belonged to a man carrying something heavy. At exactly 7:30 that morning, I began my first assignment, dusting the West Wing library. The room was larger than my entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling shelves wrapped around dark oak walls. Hundreds of books sat in perfect order. A fire crackled softly despite the cool spring weather. The scent of leather and cedar filled the air. I worked carefully, trying not to touch anything I shouldn't. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked important. And then I noticed the keypad. It was mounted beside a small wooden door hidden between two bookshelves. At first glance, it looked like a maintenance closet. But something about it felt different. The brass handle was polished. The wood around the frame showed signs of frequent use. I should have ignored it. Instead, my eyes lingered on the keypad. For digits. Simple enough. I turned away and continued dusting. But a strange feeling settled over me. Familiarity. Recognition. The kind that arrives before logic has a chance to explain itself. My heart began to beat faster. I looked back. For numbers appeared in my mind so clearly that it startled me. Not guessed. Remembered. Except that made no sense. I had never been here before. I had never met Ethan Blackwell. I shouldn't have known anything about this house. Yet my hand moved before I could stop it. My fingers pressed the keypad. 4, 7, 1, 9. The lock clicked open. I froze. The sound echoed through the library like a gunshot in a church. For several seconds, I simply stared at the door. My stomach dropped. The door slowly swung inward a few inches. Beyond it was a narrow staircase descending into darkness. How did you know that? The voice behind me nearly stopped my heart. I turned so quickly that the feather duster slipped from my hand. Ethan Blackwell stood in the doorway. 6'3", dark suit, sharp blue eyes. He wasn't angry. Somehow that was worse. He looked curious, careful, as if he had just discovered something he couldn't explain. His gaze shifted from me to the open door, then back to me. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out, because the truth was impossible. I had no idea how I knew the code, but judging by the expression on Ethan Blackwell's face, neither did he. For a moment, neither of us moved. The open doorway seemed to pull all the air from the room. Ethan stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable, while I struggled to find an explanation that did not sound completely insane. I do not know, I finally said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. His eyes remained fixed on me. They were not cold exactly. They were searching, measuring. That code has not changed in 12 years, he said. Only 3 people ever knew it. A knot tightened in my stomach. I am sorry. I should not have touched it. He glanced toward the staircase hidden beyond the door. No, most people would not even notice it was there. The silence stretched between us. Rain tapped against the tall windows somewhere beyond the library. The fire crackled softly. Every sound suddenly felt louder. Ethan stepped forward and gently closed the hidden door. The lock clicked again. Go back to your work, Claire. That was all he said. No accusation. No warning. Somehow that unsettled me more. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I dusted shelves, polished tables, straightened books that did not need straightening. But my mind stayed trapped in that moment. For numbers. For digits I should never have known. Shortly after noon, Mrs. Whitmore, the head housekeeper, assigned me to clean the second-floor gallery. The hallway stretched nearly 100 feet beneath a glass ceiling. Sunlight filtered through the clouds outside, casting pale reflections across polished hardwood floors. Portraits lined both walls. Generations of Blackwells stared down from gilded frames. Business leaders, philanthropists, politicians. The family history seemed endless. I worked slowly, moving from one painting to the next. Then I stopped. My breath caught. Near the center of the gallery hung a photograph instead of a painting. A family portrait. Ethan looked younger, maybe 25. Beside him stood a woman with warm brown hair and a gentle smile. Around them bloomed a garden filled with white roses. Something inside me shifted. A strange ache, familiar and distant at the same time. My fingers tightened around the cleaning cloth. Before I realized what I was doing, I whispered a name. Victoria. The word escaped my lips like a memory. My heart immediately began racing. I had never met Ethan's wife. I had only heard brief mentions from staff members. Yet the name felt natural, familiar, as if I had spoken it 100 times before. You knew her name? I spun around. Ethan stood at the far end of the hallway. I had not heard him approach. My face went pale. The words vanished. His gaze shifted from me to the photograph, then back to me. Nobody told you who she was. It was not a question. I could see the realization forming behind his eyes. Another impossible coincidence. Another piece of a puzzle neither of us understood. Outside, thunder rolled softly across the distant sky. Ethan looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then he said something that made every hair on my arm stand up. Claire, tell me the truth. Have we met before? The question settled over the hallway like a weight neither of us knew how to lift. Have we met before? I stared at Ethan, searching his face for some clue that this was a test, some explanation that would make the last 24 hours feel normal again. But there was nothing except genuine confusion, genuine concern. No, I said finally. At least I do not think so. Even as the words left my mouth, doubt crept into my chest. Ethan continued watching me, not in an intimidating way, more like a man standing before a locked door, hoping someone else might have the key. His gaze shifted briefly toward Victoria's photograph. The sadness in his eyes appeared so quickly that I almost missed it. Most people here avoid mentioning her, he said quietly. You said her name like you knew her. I swallowed hard. I cannot explain it. He nodded once, though I could tell he was not satisfied. Neither was I. The rest of the afternoon passed beneath a strange cloud of tension. Everywhere I went, I felt as though invisible threads connected me to pieces of this house. Familiar feelings appeared without warning. A hallway corner. The scent of lavender near the east staircase. The sound of a grandfather clock chiming 3 o'clock. None of it should have meant anything to me. Yet each detail stirred something buried deep inside my memory. By evening, rain covered the estate once again. The staff gathered briefly in the kitchen before heading home or retiring to their quarters. I carried a tray of clean dishes toward the pantry when I noticed a small door standing slightly open at the end of a narrow corridor. Warm light spilled through the crack. Curiosity pulled me closer. Inside sat an unused sitting room. Dust covered most of the furniture. White sheets draped over chairs like sleeping ghosts. It looked untouched for years. I stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of old books and dried flowers. Against the far wall stood a wooden cabinet with glass doors. Something about it immediately caught my attention. Without thinking, I crossed the room and opened the cabinet. Inside sat dozens of photo albums arranged neatly in rows. My hand moved toward one dark blue album. Not the first one, not the closest one. The third album from the bottom shelf. Somehow I knew exactly where it was. My fingers trembled as I pulled it free. The cover showed signs of age and use. I opened it slowly. Family photographs filled the pages. Birthdays, holidays, charity events, summer afternoons. Then I stopped. My breath caught. A picture near the center of the album showed Victoria sitting beneath a large oak tree. She was smiling directly at the camera. In her lap rested a little girl with blonde hair, maybe 8 years old. The girl's face was partially hidden beneath a baseball cap, but something about the image sent a chill through me. My pulse quickened. I leaned closer. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Then I heard a voice behind me. That photograph was taken 14 years ago. I nearly dropped the album. Ethan stood in the doorway. His eyes moved from my face to the open page. And for the first time since I arrived at Blackwell Manor, I saw genuine shock cross his features. For several seconds neither of us spoke. The photograph lay open between us like evidence in a trial neither of us understood. Ethan stepped closer. His attention remained fixed on the image, on the little girl sitting beside Victoria beneath the oak tree. I looked down again. The baseball cap hid most of her face, but a strange pressure built behind my eyes. A feeling that I should remember something important, something just beyond reach. "Why are you looking at that picture?" Ethan asked quietly. I swallowed. "I do not know." It sounded like a weak answer because it was. Yet it was the only truthful one I had. Ethan carefully took the album from my hands. His fingers paused on the photograph. "Victoria volunteered at several children's programs over the years," he said. "She spent time at shelters, schools, and foster organizations. Thousands of children crossed her path." His voice softened slightly. "I never met all of them." The room seemed smaller somehow, the air heavier. "Then maybe that is it," I said. "Maybe I saw her somewhere when I was young." Ethan looked at me. "Do you remember meeting her?" I closed my eyes. Nothing appeared. No memory. No face. Only fragments. The scent of flowers. A warm voice. Sunlight through tree branches. Feelings without context. "No," I admitted. "I wish I did." He studied me for another moment before closing the album. "Claire, where did you grow up?" The question caught me off guard. "Mostly foster homes." His expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. "Mostly. I moved around a lot before I was adopted." Ethan nodded slowly. "And your adoptive parents?" My chest tightened. "They passed away when I was 19. Sympathy flickered across his face. Genuine sympathy. It made me unexpectedly emotional. I looked away before he could notice. Outside, rain streaked across the windows. Somewhere deeper in the mansion, an old clock chimed 8 times. Ethan placed the album back into the cabinet. "You should get some rest." I nodded. The conversation was clearly over. Yet neither of us moved toward the door. Both of us seemed trapped by the same question. Why did any of this feel familiar? Eventually, I returned to my small room on the 3rd floor. Sleep should have come easily after such a long day. Instead, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the photograph again. Victoria smiling beneath the oak tree. The little girl beside her. A strange sense of loss settled over me. Around midnight, I finally drifted into a restless sleep. Then came the dream. I stood beneath a giant oak tree. Sunlight filtered through green leaves overhead. Somewhere nearby, a woman laughed softly. The sound felt warm. Safe. I turned toward the voice, but before I could see her face, she handed me something. A folded piece of paper. My small hands reached for it. I looked down. Written across the front was a single word. "Claire." I woke up gasping. Moonlight spilled across the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. For several seconds, I sat frozen in bed. Then I noticed something impossible. A folded piece of paper rested on my nightstand, and I knew with absolute certainty it had not been there when I went to sleep. For several long seconds, I simply stared at the folded paper. Moonlight painted silver lines across the room, illuminating the small cream-colored envelope resting on the nightstand beside my bed. My pulse hammered in my ears. I knew it had not been there earlier. I would have noticed. I sat up slowly and reached toward it. The paper felt old, not fragile, but worn in a way that suggested it had been handled many times. My name was written across the front in elegant handwriting. Claire. Nothing else. No last name. No date. Just Claire. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. Inside was a single sheet. The message contained only one sentence. "If you ever feel lost, look where the roses bloom in winter." I read the words 3 times. Then 4. The sentence made no sense. Yet the moment I saw it, something stirred inside me. A faint memory. White flowers. Snow on the ground. A woman's laughter carried by the wind. I pressed a hand against my forehead. The image vanished before I could grasp it. Sleep became impossible after that. I spent the rest of the night sitting beside the window, staring at the dark estate grounds while the mysterious note remained in my lap. By morning, exhaustion weighed heavily on me. The sky outside had cleared. Sunlight stretched across the lawns and gardens surrounding the manor. During breakfast preparations, I considered showing the note to Mrs. Whitmore. Then I changed my mind. Something told me not to. Something told me this belonged to a story that had started long before I arrived. Around 10 o'clock, I was assigned to help organize storage shelves near the rear conservatory. The glass structure connected to the western side of the mansion and overlooked acres of landscaped gardens. As I worked, the sentence repeated in my mind. "Look where the roses bloom in winter." Eventually, curiosity became stronger than caution. During my lunch break, I slipped outside and followed the stone pathways winding through the estate. Spring flowers had begun appearing everywhere. Tulips, daffodils, lavender. Yet none of them felt important. I continued walking until I reached an older section of the grounds hidden behind tall hedges. There, surrounded by iron fencing, stood a greenhouse. Unlike the conservatory attached to the house, this structure looked decades old. The glass panels reflected sunlight like mirrors. A small brass plaque hung beside the entrance. Victoria's Winter Garden. My breath caught. The note suddenly felt heavier inside my pocket. I pushed open the door. Warm air wrapped around me immediately. The scent of soil and blooming flowers filled the space. Rows of roses stretched beneath the glass ceiling. White roses. Hundreds of them. Even though it was early spring, many remained in full bloom. I moved slowly between the rows. The greenhouse felt strangely familiar. More familiar than any place had a right to feel. Then I noticed something tucked beneath a wooden bench near the back wall. A small metal box. My heart began racing again. I knelt beside it. The lid carried a faded engraving. VB, Victoria Blackwell. And when I carefully lifted the lid, I discovered dozens of sealed letters stacked neatly inside, waiting for someone to find them. My hands trembled as I lifted the first envelope from the metal box. Dust clung to the edges, but the handwriting remained clear. Elegant, careful, familiar. Every envelope carried the same name written across the front. Claire. My breath caught. There had to be a mistake. Dozens of letters rested inside the box, and every single one was addressed to me. I stared at them, unable to move. The greenhouse seemed impossibly quiet. Even the soft hum of the heating system faded into the background. All I could hear was my heartbeat. Slowly, I selected the oldest envelope. A date had been written in the corner. 14 years ago. My fingers hesitated before breaking the seal. The paper inside had yellowed slightly with age. I unfolded it and began to read. Dear Claire, if you are reading this, then life has already taken you farther than either of us could have imagined. I stopped breathing. The words blurred for a moment before I forced myself to continue. I do not know how old you will be when you find this letter. I do not know where life will place you. But I know one thing with certainty. You are stronger than you realize. Tears stung my eyes unexpectedly. I had never seen this handwriting before. Yet the warmth behind every sentence felt familiar, as though I had heard these words long ago and simply forgotten. I turned the page. The next line made my stomach tighten. There may come a day when you wonder why certain doors seem familiar, why certain places feel like memories. When that day comes, trust your heart, not your fear. I lowered the letter. The greenhouse suddenly felt too warm, too small. The strange events of the past week rushed through my mind. The hidden keypad, Victoria's photograph, the dreams, the note beside my bed. None of it felt random anymore. Someone had expected this. Someone had planned for it years before it happened. A floorboard creaked behind me. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Claire. Ethan's voice echoed softly through the greenhouse. I quickly folded the letter. Ethan stepped through the rows of roses. Sunlight filtered through the glass above, casting moving shadows across his dark suit. His eyes immediately found the open metal box, then the envelope in my hand. He stopped walking. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he glanced toward the engraved initials on the lid. Victoria Blackwell. The color slowly drained from his face. Where did you find that? He asked. I pointed toward the bench, hidden underneath. Ethan approached carefully, like someone nearing a fragile memory. His gaze moved across the stack of letters. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. Then something else. Recognition. I have never seen these before, he whispered. I looked down at the envelope still clutched in my hands. They are all addressed to me. Ethan stared at me for a long moment. Then he reached into the box and removed a sealed envelope from the very bottom. Unlike the others, this one carried a different name. His own. The greenhouse fell silent. Neither of us moved, because suddenly we both understood the same terrifying possibility. Victoria had not hidden these letters from the world. She had hidden them specifically for us to find. Neither of us opened the letters immediately. Somehow that felt impossible. The greenhouse had become more than a room filled with roses. It felt like a place where time had been waiting. Ethan stood across from me holding the envelope addressed to him. I still clutched the letter meant for me. Sunlight filtered through the glass ceiling. painting pale patterns across the floor between us. How many years? Ethan asked quietly. I looked at the stack again. The oldest one is 14 years old. His jaw tightened. 14 years. Long before Victoria became ill. Long before the final chapter of her life. Ethan stared at the envelope in his hand, as though it might disappear if he blinked. She never told me about any of this. There was no anger in his voice. Only confusion. The kind that comes when someone you loved suddenly becomes a stranger. After a long silence, he carefully broke the seal. I watched his eyes move across the page and sighed. At first his expression remained neutral. Then something changed. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. His shoulders relaxed. The tension he carried seemed to soften. For a moment, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man hearing a familiar voice after years of silence. I lowered my gaze and unfolded a second letter from my stack. The date at the top showed it had been written 13 years earlier. Dear Claire, if you are reading this, then you are still searching for answers. That made me smile despite everything. She had been right. I was searching for answers. Every hour seemed to create new questions. I continued reading. There will be moments when you feel like pieces of your life do not fit together. Do not let that frighten you. Some stories are meant to unfold slowly. Some truths need time before they are ready to be understood. My throat tightened. The words felt personal, intimate, as though she had known me far better than I knew myself. Ethan suddenly spoke. She mentioned you. My head snapped up. What? He looked down at the page again. Not by name. At least not in this letter. She wrote about a child she worried about. A child who believed she had been forgotten. My chest felt hollow. What else did she say? Ethan hesitated before answering. She wrote that one day I would meet someone important. Someone carrying a piece of her heart. The greenhouse seemed to tilt around me. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Outside, a gentle breeze moved through the estate gardens. The roses swayed softly behind the glass. I looked back at my letter and noticed something I had missed earlier. A small note written near the bottom margin. Tiny handwriting. Almost hidden. My pulse quickened as I leaned closer. There is a photograph behind the blue wall. When the time comes, you will know where to find it. I stared at the sentence. The blue wall. Another clue. Another secret waiting somewhere inside Blackwell Manor. Slowly I raised my eyes to Ethan. Judging by the look on his face, he had just discovered something unexpected in his own letter as well. And for the first time since finding the box, I realized the letters were not explaining the mystery. They were leading us deeper into it. The rest of that afternoon passed in a haze of unanswered questions. Ethan and I carried several of the letters back to the manor, but neither of us spoke much during the walk. The gravel path crunched beneath our shoes while the greenhouse disappeared behind us. I kept replaying the note in my mind. There is a photograph behind the blue wall. When the time comes, you will know where to find it. The words felt less like a clue and more like a memory waiting to wake up. By evening, dark clouds had gathered again over the estate. Rain tapped softly against the windows as I finished my duties. Every hallway seemed different now. Every room felt connected to a story hidden beneath the surface. Around 9 o'clock, I was dusting a corridor on the second floor when I noticed something strange. Most of the walls throughout the mansion were painted warm ivory or soft gray. But at the far end of the hallway stood a single blue wall. Not bright blue. A muted shade, almost faded with age. The moment I saw it, my stomach tightened. I stopped walking. A chill traveled down my arms. I had never noticed the wall before. Yet suddenly it felt important. Familiar. I moved toward it slowly. Family photographs hung across its surface in neat rows. Generations of Blackwells smiled from silver frames. Weddings, graduations, charity events. Decades of memories displayed beneath soft lighting. My eyes drifted from one photograph to another. Then I froze. Near the center of the wall stood a frame slightly different from the rest. Smaller, older, positioned lower than the others. My pulse quickened. Without understanding why, I reached toward it. The frame lifted easily from its hook. Behind it, hidden in the wall itself, was a narrow compartment. I stepped back in shock. The letters had been right. My hands trembled as I opened the compartment door. Inside rested a single photograph and a folded document secured with a faded ribbon. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned to find Ethan approaching down the hallway. He stopped the moment he saw the open compartment. His eyes widened. "Claire," he said quietly, "how did you know that was there?" I looked from him to the hidden space in the wall. I did not. Even to my own ears, The answer sounded impossible. Ethan stepped beside me. Together we stared at the photograph. It showed Victoria standing beneath the same oak tree from the picture I had seen in the album. Beside her stood the little blonde girl again. This time her face was fully visible. My breath caught. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. The child in the photograph was me. 8 years old, smiling beside Victoria Blackwell. Ethan looked at the image, then at me, then back again. The silence stretched between us. Finally, he picked up the folded document resting beneath the photograph. Across the front, written in Victoria's unmistakable handwriting, were 6 words that changed everything. For Claire, when she remembers. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. I stared at the photograph while 1,000 broken pieces inside my mind struggled to fit together. The little girl smiling beside Victoria was me. There was no doubt. The same eyes, the same hair, the small scar near my left eyebrow from falling off a swing when I was 7. Memories I had not thought about in years suddenly rushed forward. Foster homes, different schools, different cities, faces that blurred together. But one face remained clear. A woman who always smelled like roses. A woman who visited more than once. A woman who listened when nobody else did. My hand rose to cover my mouth. I remember her. The words escaped before I could stop them. Ethan looked at me immediately. What did you say? My eyes never left the photograph. I remember her. My voice shook. Not everything. Just pieces. The hallway around me seemed to fade away. I could almost hear a distant laugh. Feel warm sunlight on my face. See white rose petals drifting through the air. Victoria kneeling beside me. Victoria telling me that difficult beginnings did not determine the rest of a person's story. Victoria promising that I mattered. Tears filled my eyes before I realized they were there. Ethan remained silent. For once he was not searching for answers. He was simply listening. Slowly he unfolded the document. The paper inside appeared older than the letters. Several pages held together with a ribbon. Across the top of the first page was a date from 14 years earlier. Ethan began reading aloud. If you are reading this, then Claire has finally found her way back. My heart stopped. Ethan looked at me briefly before continuing. There are truths I chose to protect until the right time. Claire may not remember me immediately. That was never important. What matters is that she remembers who she is. I gripped the photograph tighter. Ethan turned the page. The next paragraph explained everything. 14 years earlier, Victoria had volunteered at a children's transition program for foster youth. That was where she met me. According to her notes, I had arrived withdrawn, frightened, and unwilling to trust adults. Yet over time we formed a bond. She visited regularly. She read books to me. She helped pay for tutoring when I struggled in school. She became something I had not realized I was missing. A constant presence. A safe place. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Small moments flashed through my mind with increasing clarity. Coloring books. Rose gardens. Birthday cards. The smell of vanilla tea. Ethan's voice grew quieter as he continued reading. Then he suddenly stopped. His eyes fixed on a single line. The color drained from his face. What is it? I asked. He looked up slowly. For several seconds, he seemed unable to speak. Finally, he handed me the page. My gaze dropped to the sentence Victoria had underlined years ago. Claire Bennett is not here by coincidence. One day she will inherit the foundation I built in secret. And when that day comes, Ethan must help her finish what we started together. The words seemed impossible to process. I read the sentence again, then again. The foundation I built in secret. Ethan must help her finish what we started together. My hands shook so badly that the page rattled softly. Ethan stood beside me, staring at the document as though it belonged to someone he had never truly known. The hallway remained silent except for the distant ticking of a grandfather clock somewhere deeper inside the manor. A foundation? I whispered. Ethan slowly nodded. Victoria supported dozens of charities during her life. But this is different. He took the papers gently and turned several pages. His eyes moved quickly across paragraphs written in the same elegant handwriting. She is describing a private organization, one I have never heard of. That statement alone was enough to leave me speechless. Ethan Blackwell knew every division of his companies, every investment, every charitable project attached to his family's name. If even he did not know about this, then Victoria had hidden it carefully. We carried the documents into the library and spent the next 2 hours reading every page. Outside, rain began falling again. Water streaked down the tall windows while the fire crackled softly nearby. Piece by piece, a new picture emerged. 14 years earlier, Victoria had quietly created a scholarship and mentoring network for children leaving the foster care system. She funded education, housing assistance, counseling programs, and emergency support. She had done it anonymously. No press releases, no charity galas, no recognition. She called it the Second Beginning Initiative. My chest tightened as I read story after story. Young adults who had become teachers, nurses, business owners, social workers, people who had simply needed someone to believe in them. Then I found my name again. Claire Bennett, participant number 17, recommended for advanced educational sponsorship. I stared at the words. Participant. Ethan looked over my shoulder. You were one of the first. Memories surfaced like photographs rising through water. A tutor helping me after school. A scholarship application that somehow got approved. A summer program I could never afford but attended anyway. For years I had assumed those opportunities came from different organizations, different donors. Now I realized they all traced back to the same person. Victoria. Tears blurred the page. Ethan remained quiet. After a while he stood and walked toward the window. His reflection shimmered against the dark glass. She never told me, he said softly. Not once. There was sadness in his voice, but also admiration, as if he was discovering new reasons to love someone he had already lost. I turned another page and froze. Attached near the back of the document was a recent photograph, much newer than the others. Only 3 years old. My pulse quickened. The image showed a conference room filled with people. Mentors, volunteers, program leaders. In the center stood Victoria, smiling. Behind her hung a large banner displaying the foundation logo. But that was not what caught my attention. Standing directly beside her was a woman I recognized instantly. A woman who had recently applied for a position at Blackwell Manor. A woman who had abruptly withdrawn her application the day before I arrived. And according to the handwritten note beneath the photograph, she had been the last person Victoria trusted with the foundation's biggest secret. The photograph remained in my hands long after Ethan and I stopped speaking. Rain drummed softly against the library windows while the fire cast golden light across the room. My eyes stayed fixed on the woman standing beside Victoria in the conference room. Her name surfaced almost immediately. Rebecca Hayes. I remembered seeing it on an application file during my first week at the manor. She had been scheduled for an interview with Mrs. Whitmore. Then, without explanation, she withdrew. At the time it had seemed unimportant. Now it felt like another piece of a puzzle that had been waiting years to be solved. Ethan took the photograph and studied it carefully. Do you know her? He asked. Only the name. He nodded and reached for one of the folders scattered across the table. Within minutes, he located the application records. Rebecca Hayes, 42 years old, nonprofit administrator, former education consultant. The details seemed ordinary until we noticed the address. My pulse quickened. It was located less than 30 miles from the estate. She is close, I said. Ethan's eyes narrowed thoughtfully, closer than I expected. He turned another page in Victoria's documents. Tucked between financial reports and program notes sat a handwritten entry. The ink had faded slightly with age. Rebecca understands the final phase. If I cannot finish it myself, she will know what to do. Ethan exhaled slowly. Final phase. The words lingered in the room. Another mystery. Another secret Victoria had never shared. I leaned back in my chair. Exhaustion pressed against me, but curiosity kept me alert. Why would she hide all of this? Ethan stared into the fire for a moment before answering. Because she believed some things should be built quietly. His voice softened. That sounds like her. For the first time since discovering the letters, I saw something shift in him. Not grief exactly. Acceptance. As though each new revelation hurt, but also brought him closer to the woman he thought he already knew. Hours passed as we continued reading. Near midnight, I discovered another envelope tucked inside the back cover of the foundation records. Unlike the others, it carried both our names. Claire and Ethan. My heartbeat quickened immediately. Ethan noticed it too. We exchanged a look before carefully opening the seal. Inside was a single page. The message was short. If you have reached this letter, then you have already found each other. Good. The next truth cannot be discovered alone. Trust what you remember. Trust what he protects. And above all, trust the key. I frowned. The key. Ethan looked equally confused. We searched the page again. Nothing else appeared. No explanation. No clues. Then something slipped from between the folded paper and landed softly on the table. A small brass key, no larger than my thumb. Both of us stared at it in silence. A tiny tag hung from the ring. On the tag, written in Victoria's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 simple words. The lake house attic. The drive to the lake house began before sunrise. Neither Ethan nor I had slept much. The brass key rested in the center console between us as rain clouds drifted across the pale morning sky. The property sat nearly 2 hours north of the city, hidden among tall pines and overlooking a quiet lake that reflected the gray light like polished glass. According to Ethan, Victoria had loved the place. Whenever life became too loud, she escaped there. As the car rolled down the winding driveway, I immediately understood why. The lake house felt peaceful, timeless. A white wooden structure surrounded by wildflowers and towering trees. For a moment, standing in the gravel driveway, I experienced another strange sensation. Familiarity. Not recognition exactly. More like an emotion returning before the memory attached to it. Ethan noticed my expression. "You have been here before, have you not?" I looked toward the porch. A weathered rocking chair sat beside the front door. Wind chimes swayed softly overhead. "I think so." My voice barely rose above a whisper. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and old books. Dust covered some surfaces, but everything remained carefully maintained. Victoria's presence lingered everywhere. Framed photographs, shelves filled with novels, a knitted blanket draped across a sofa. It felt less like an abandoned property and more like a conversation paused midway through a sentence. We climbed the narrow staircase leading to the attic. My heartbeat grew louder with every step. At the top, a small wooden door waited beneath the slanted roof. Ethan removed the brass key from his pocket. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then he inserted it into the lock. The mechanism clicked immediately. The door opened. Sunlight streamed through a round attic window, illuminating a room far different from what I expected. There were no dusty boxes, no forgotten furniture. Instead, the attic had been transformed into an office. Filing cabinets lined one wall. Bookshelves covered another. A large desk sat beneath the window. Everything appeared organized, intentional, prepared, as though someone expected us to arrive. My gaze moved across the room until it landed on a sealed envelope resting alone on the desk. The handwriting on the front made my breath catch. Claire and Ethan. Together. Ethan picked it up carefully. Neither of us spoke as he opened it. Inside was a final letter, longer than any we had found before. His eyes scanned the first page. Then he handed it to me. The opening sentence immediately brought tears to my eyes. "If you are reading this, then my greatest hope has come true. You found each other." I sat down slowly and continued reading. Victoria explained everything. The foundation had never been about money. It had never been about scholarships. Those things mattered, but they were not the true purpose. The foundation existed to create second beginnings, to help people rebuild their lives after believing they had been forgotten. And then I reached the final paragraph. My hands began trembling, because for the first time, Victoria explained why she chose me. Years ago, when I was a frightened foster child, she saw something in me. Not potential, not talent, kindness. And according to the final lines of the letter, there was one last truth neither Ethan nor I had discovered yet. A truth hidden somewhere inside the attic itself. The final truth did not reveal itself immediately. Ethan and I spent nearly an hour searching the attic. We opened drawers, examined shelves, checked filing cabinets filled with records from the foundation. Outside, afternoon sunlight shimmered across the lake beyond the round window. The peaceful scene felt strangely distant compared to the storm of emotions inside me. Every discovery over the past week had rewritten a piece of my life. Yet Victoria's final words remained fixed in my mind. One last truth, hidden somewhere inside the attic itself. Eventually, exhaustion forced me into the old wooden chair beside the desk. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. The room smelled faintly of cedar and paper. Then a memory surfaced. Not a complete memory, just a fragment. A younger version of me sitting at a desk. Victoria smiling. A music box playing softly in the background. My eyes snapped open. Music box. I stood immediately. Ethan looked up from a filing cabinet. "What is it?" I turned slowly, scanning the room. Then I saw it. On the highest shelf near the window sat a small wooden music box covered in dust. My heart began racing. Somehow I knew it mattered. Ethan carefully brought it down. The box appeared ordinary at first glance. Dark walnut wood, delicate carvings along the edges. When he opened it, a soft melody filled the attic. The tune struck me like lightning. Tears instantly filled my eyes. I remembered. Not everything, but enough. Victoria used to play that song whenever she visited the children's center. She called it the Song of Second Chances. Ethan watched silently as memories returned. Birthdays, encouragement, conversations about hope, moments I thought had been lost forever. Then I noticed something hidden beneath the velvet lining inside the box. A folded document. Ethan removed it carefully. The paper was newer than everything else we had found. It had been written shortly before Victoria passed away. We read it together. The letter explained the final truth. Victoria had never intended for me to inherit the foundation alone. She believed the organization needed two people. One person who understood resources. One person who understood struggle. Ethan and I stared at the page in silence. The final paragraph made my throat tighten. Ethan, if you are reading this, then you finally know why I kept this from you. Claire, if you are reading this, then you finally know why I never forgot you. The foundation was never my legacy. People are. Continue what we started. Together. Tears blurred the words. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan walked toward the attic window overlooking the lake. Sunlight reflected across the water like liquid gold. She planned all of this, he said softly. I nodded. Years ago. He smiled for the first time since I arrived at Blackwell Manor. Not the polite smile of a businessman. A genuine one. Then we should not disappoint her. Outside, a breeze moved across the lake. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes echoed softly. I looked at the photograph of Victoria resting on the desk. For the first time, the mystery no longer felt heavy. It felt complete. She had not left behind secrets to divide people. She had left behind clues to bring them together. And standing there beside Ethan, with sunlight filling the attic and a future neither of us expected waiting ahead, I finally understood the lesson she had been trying to teach all along. Sometimes the people who change your life do not stay forever. Sometimes they simply leave a path bright enough for you to find your way home.